zero charge, wouldn't come up, wouldn't do anything.
You ready? Mac, get set up there. Mac, you ready to go?
Oh, shoot, now we're on.
If you would, please stand and join us as we have an invocation and say the pledge. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for another beautiful day here in paradise. We thank you for the blessings that you've given us all. We pray now that you'll just be with us as we meet to conduct the county's business and give us wisdom to make the right decisions. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department. I apologize for my delay. I was meeting with our real estate economist.
First thing we'll get to is minutes, real quick. We've got 3 sets of minutes I believe you should have, had an opportunity to look at. October 16th, November 5th, and November the 8th. Do we do them all at once? Or?
That's fine.
Okay.
If there's a
Just
motion.
one
to
motion?
approve them all.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. As far as announcements, just real quick, if you haven't already done so, please either turn off or silence your cell phone. We can minimize interruptions. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Try to get you out of here where you can have dinner with your sweetheart before it gets too late. Mac, what you got?
Thanks, sir. The first 2 items are legislative, and we have a request to continue on each one of those. We can take them separately or together if you'd like.
Either's fine.
Let's do them together if we can.
Christ the King Episcopal Church Education Building Number 2, small scale amendment, and the Golf Garden large scale amendment. We have a request to continue each of those to the March 14th Planning Commission meeting, which would be in this location at 4 p.m.
Commissioners?
Motion approved.
Or to continue.
Emergent continue.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Let me ask Mac just before we get started, because at what point will we start having meetings up at the Freeport office?
We could possibly start that during the month of March. I think we're having the Technical Review Committee meeting for March 6th in that location.
The reason I ask if we're continuing these things do we need to,
Yeah, let's be specific. I guess, do we know we just have to continue them to a date and time certain, but.
I've been assured that, and we've already advertised the March 6th Technical Review Committee meeting. The Granicus system is installed. The fiber has been laid to the building. And hopefully within the next week or 10 days, the fiber terminator will actually make the connection, so we will have a robust internet connection there.
should we go ahead and plan to have the March meeting there?
It would be at the pleasure of this board. The facility will be available.
What are your thoughts? I know it'd be a lot more convenient for staff.
Well, it was, because now we have a door that's actually been constructed through the back wall of that room, so we can actually move from the planning department into that boardroom, much like we used to do here. So it'd certainly be convenient for planning staff. It is in the center of the county.
I was talking with Karen earlier. She said there's only like 5 seats difference between this room and that room, so I don't see, and I know how difficult it is for staff to get things together and have to move locations and try to get things done. I'd rather, if that room's going to be ready and available, I would prefer to have it up there. But I don't know what it just makes sense.
I'm good with that as long as it's ready.
Yeah. Do we need to,
Yeah, but a motion to have the March meeting and the Freeport office would be appropriate.
I'll make a motion, go ahead.
Before we hit up, I'll second.
I'll make a motion that we have the March meeting in the Freeport Planning Hall. What is that room called?
The Freeport
Meeting room?
boardroom?
The Freeport BCC boardroom.
All right, so I'll make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Uh,
Motion
Could,
carries.
could we modify the 2 continuances we just did
That's what, yeah.
to relocate that meeting to that location?
Do we need a motion to change that motion?
I think we're covered with our latest motion of having the meeting there.
If you want belt and suspenders, we can do it real easy.
Just go ahead and do it.
Make a motion that we amend the earlier motion to state that the 2 items that were already previously passed to the March 14th meeting be held in Freeport in accordance with our motion that was just heard.
Second?
I do not want to read the minutes on that.
Okay. Karen, did you get all that? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Karen, will
Okay.
you send us an email to remind us where the meeting's gonna be?
Yeah, and just for information, that location is 842 County Highway East, and it's Suite 118.
It's a great space. It really is.
Mr. Chairman, the next 3 items are quasi judicial.
Anyone who anticipates testifying on any of these items, if you would stand, to be sworn in at this time. Okay, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide to this board will be the truth? Thank you. When you come forward, if you would just state your name and state that you've been sworn in. And I think we're gonna have to move the first one to the last, right?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I believe that the applicant for item number 3 is advertising stated 5 PM, and the agent doesn't appear to be here yet. So if it would be your pleasure, could we move number 3 to the end of the agenda to give them an opportunity, and just in case there's someone here from the public that saw the 5 PM notice, we certainly want them to be accommodated.
We can do that.
Thank you, sir. That would move us to item number 4, the Santa Rosa Commerce Park. This has been reviewed by Bob Baranti. It's a major development, and I'll ask Bob to briefly introduce it for us.
Good evening. This is a major development order application submitted by JP Engineering on behalf of R&M Property Acquisition, requesting approval to develop and construct an annex warehouse on 5.91 plus or minus acres with a future land use of village mixed use. As Matt stated, the location and the parcel number is in your staff report. Before we turn it over to the agent, I'd like to enter this into the record.
Accepted.
Thank you, and I'll turn it over to the
My name's Matthew Parker with JP Engineering, agent to the owner, and I have been sworn in.
Okay.
I'm the civil engineer on the project manager. We work real closely with your staff to meet all the technical review committee requirements and comments. We've been through DRB and have addressed and met all of their requirements, and so I'm really here just to answer any questions that you might have on the project. The project's going to be a United States Postal Service distribution annex, so it'll be a relocation of the existing facility, which will be a welcome advancement of that facility, both from a functional perspective and a safety and security perspective. We've also worked really hard to blend the architecture with the requirements of the DRB and to fit into the neighborhood, and so we're really proud of the project. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions that you might have.
What kind of traffic impact does this have on Highway 98?
That is, I don't have that number with me. That was turned in and approved. It was 2 trips shy of requiring a right-hand turn lane on Highway 98. The developers and owners decided to put the turn lane in anyway to enhance safety on Highway 98. It did not throw the project into a very large traffic impact problem, and it worked out really nicely. We've got a full access connection right there. And the way that it's accessed, I can show you. This is Church Street and Highway 98. So we have a main connection point for the overall facility and parking, and then this side is more so where the annexation and distribution aspects occur along Church Street. So it will utilize this intersection for the annex, and then this for the Publix.
So it's actually going to be a new post office and the warehouse distribution center?
At this time, only the annex, they've only committed to the annex.
Okay.
We do not know for sure if this retail section will be a postal service center yet. And I'd have to talk to the owners about how that negotiation was. That I've heard they're not committed to doing that yet, but that is the vision. We think that they will, but it's not confirmed at this time.
So most of your traffic going in and out of that annex then is just going to be trucks?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
You said this went through DRBRA?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it did.
And it's supposed to meet some kind of design that's compatible with the stuff around it?
Yes, sir. There's not a whole lot of stuff around it. To the west of us is a DOT stormwater retention pond. We're mimicking that and putting our stormwater facility over there adjacent to that. Across the street from this facility, from Church Street, is a church, so it's an institutional use there. There's also a strip of land between this property and Church Street that is not owned by, it's not a part of this property. There's a small little strip that is state forest land, so it'll create even an additional buffer from the required landscape buffer between Church Street, which was really nice. I've got some renderings of the building. I think the architect did a fantastic job of
Who did?
showing that look while meeting the postal services requirements to provide safety and security for that facility.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the building looks like something that was designed in the 70s.
Right. I didn't do the design on that. You know, I'm
I mean-
the asphalt and curb guy. But the DRB, it was received really well by the DRB.
Wow.
They were actually gave him a lot of praise and a lot of compliment on the way that he mixed some of the glass features. And it's difficult to bring something that you know, they're not allowed to have any windows. You know, some of the doors have to be these lockdown doors for obvious reasons. So, yeah, you know, that's kind of where it ended up. I've got some pictures and some renderings.
Oh, I'm seeing them.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm looking at.
Mr. Perry, do you want to switch to the design review board?
No, but I'm surprised they let something like this go through, to be honest with you. It doesn't look like hardly anything in our area, unless it's an institutional building like a church, but
Good evening, Tim Brown with Planning and Development. I took it to the DRB. The bottom line is they sort of relaxed their standards because it's a post office.
I can tell.
I mean, they were going to have some comments, but once they found out it was a post office, those comments went away.
I don't think they should relax it because it's a post office or something. I mean, if we're gonna have things compatible, it ought to be compatible.
Well, I mean, amongst staff, we discussed that there's nothing that looks like this on Highway 98. I mean, there's nothing that looks like this building. And that can be
No.
good, that can be bad, that can be neither. But they did approve it unanimously, but mostly because it's gonna be a post office.
Yeah. Well, that's not our job, but I just wanted to comment. Sorry.
Yes, sir, that's okay.
Hopefully it's more functional than this
Yeah,
pretty.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for the applicant?
Sounded like Lee had several.
I'm gonna keep my mouth shut from here on out.
No, please don't. We'll We'll open it up for public comments. We didn't have anybody sign up. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comments. Commissioners? We're open for a motion.
I'm looking at Michael Hartman down there.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will not be seconding.
Oh, Michael, we don't get to go home. Say something. I'm waiting on you too.
That's an ugly building.
It is ugly. But it isn't our job.
That's true.
No.
We're not the aesthetic police.
I'll second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion carries.
That wasn't aimed at you.
No.
I promise.
No, I know it's needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. But do tell the guy it's ugly, it's ugly.
Yeah, it's ugly building.
No, please don't, please don't.
I think we need to talk to the design review board.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Somebody's got an open slot right now. You
They
can
got an opening, but we don't wanna lose you, so you can't move.
Actually, we got Bob Brooks sitting right in the audience. We'll put him on.
That's right, that's right.
Oh, God, Steve, I gotta read. That's one of those pictures. Oh, no, it's just.
I hope there's a lot of pictures in that book.
Good.
Well, you gotta do something, Mike. I know you're
You got
tired.
here late.
And it's gonna be on 99.
Steve,
Go ahead, Mac.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This brings us to item number 5 on the agenda, the Greenway Station Technical Review. This major development has been reviewed by Tim Brown, and I'll ask Tim to briefly introduce it for us.
Good evening again. This is a major development or application submitted by Emerald Coast Associates requesting the approval to develop 35 condominiums, 36,302 square feet of commercial, and a 50-unit lodge on 4.69 acres, which, with a future land use of village mixed use and neighborhood infill. It's located on the north side of County Road 30A between Eastern Lake Road and the County 38 intersection. I'm sorry. Yes, that's what it says. So, I handed out a new staff report. There were changes done between when you first received it, so I request that this new staff report be entered into evidence.
Is it approved, reception?
Thank you. So they have a proportionate fair share requirement of $133,000. There are 17 conditions, and there's conditions from planning, environmental, public works. I think that covers all of the conditions. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
A question, I'm just noticing, and this may be why we have a new staff report. In the packet that we had, there was a comment on the change in parking spaces.
Yes, initially, when they did the resubmittal and we were reviewing it, they reduced their parking from 208 spaces to 204 spaces. However, the conceptual PUD was approved with a parking deviation to 208. So if they go below 208, then they're gonna have to amend their PUD because that's what was approved. So what they did to solve that is they added 9 compact spaces, which they're allowed to do, which got them back up to 208. So the current site plan shows 208 parking spaces, which is the minimum allowed under their
Yeah,
PUD.
'cause I know it was questionable before, just on the parking.
Yeah, it was a 68 space reduction,
Right.
the deviation.
So there's a ratio for compact to regular size?
You can have 20%, a maximum of 20% of your required parking. So if you have 100 spaces, then you can have 20% of 100.
Oh, I got you.
Just hope everybody's not driving a pickup truck every day.
Yeah, because they're tight. These
Yeah.
compact spaces
Yeah.
are tight.
Okay.
But there's only 9, and there's 208
I understand.
total spaces.
That was just something I had noticed when we got the packet the other day, that
Yeah, and,
because of what we did before on parking raised a concern to me. So,
right, and there was also a comment about their traffic study from
Right.
Preble Ridge, because Preble Ridge couldn't do the proportionate fair share until that was amended. Well, they've since done that, and now they're saying it meets the requirements, but there's a $133,000 proportionate
all?
fair share fee.
Okay.
But that previous staff report was asking them to amend their traffic study.
Okay. Well, that was my question. Anybody else have anything for staff?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The longer the spoke, the bigger the tire, Mr. Chairman. So we'll keep this quick. My name is Steve Hall. My firm is Hall and Runnels. And I'm here representing the developer. For those of you who have been on the commission since last June, you'll remember that we came through and reviewed the conceptual PUD in some great detail. And it was ultimately approved unanimously here and then unanimously again by the BOCC in July, last July. So we spent our time since then adding the detail work to the same site plan, adding civil engineering, stormwater, the kind of engineering details that were not in the conceptual plan. So if you remember, that last hearing was a legislative format, and now we're back, as the Land Development Code requires, with a quasi-judicial format for the final approval. So what I've got is the second page that you've got there. Shows the differences between the conceptual plan that you approved and the detailed plan that is before you now. Ms. Brooke, I understand that you're the one person on the board who hasn't heard the full presentation.
That's correct.
And I would be glad to provide that in as much detail as we need to in order to make you comfortable with the details on the project.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Hall, you do want to make this binder an exhibit?
I'm sorry?
You would like to make this binder an exhibit and introduce it into the record, right?
Well, I don't usually, Sydney, but I'd be glad to add it. It's more like just a assist with the slideshow.
Be safe, we'll
Yeah, I
introduce.
think we should.
That'd be great, and I'd be fine with that. I do need to collect them afterwards, because I kind of reuse them at the BOCC level, if that's all right with you.
One.
You can, I have an extra one.
Okay.
So the changes that you'll see on the plan before you were a lot, they were related to two things. One, there was a change in the LDC since we all met the last time. And in chapter 2, they did away with the distinction between residential and mixed-use PUDs in that section of the code. They took that distinction out, and they did away with all the internal percentage requirements that they had before. So we had a variance which addressed that internal percentage for a mixed-use facility. And since those were taken out, we've removed that variance because it's no longer necessary under the Land Development Code. The second is that in the technical review, we had new comments come back from Public Works that dealt with that. If you look on the page that gives you the site plan, they were concerned about the depth of the islands in the right-of-way and the service road. So they asked us if we could design it in a way where those islands would be thicker and that you could provide more stacking distance for ingress and egress, so that we didn't get quite so much tie-up on that service road when people were trying to get in and out of the project. So it sounded like a good idea. We added that into the design. And so we had some changes in the right-of-way improvements that are before you. That also, the buildings did not move with that change. They stayed in the same place. But the configuration of the parking and the sidewalk and the covered areas in front of the building changed and reduced by 5 feet. So we had an initial variance of 15, requested 15, and now we had a request of 10. So we've increased that variance, the setback of the building from the edge of the right-of-way. Or, I'm sorry, the setback of the cover of over the sidewalk to that right-of-way. The last thing is that at the request of an HOA, Representative Melissa Ward, representing Summers Edge Group with her law firm, asked us to put some more detail into the way we allocate parking spaces. And basically the answer is the developer is keeping the whole thing. It's not going to be subdivided. It's not going to be parceled out. It'll be a leasehold subdivision. And when each individual user comes in, a restaurant or a retail shop, they have to get their certificate of land use compliance, the CLUC. And in order to get that CLUC, the staff has to be able to see how parking spaces are being allocated between all those leaseholders. And it makes good sense. We just finished it. I just finished it with them on another project. So basically, they've asked if we would include a shared parking agreement as a part of each lease that we make within the complex, so that when the restaurant owner goes in for their CLUC, they will be able to hand the public works staff or the planning staff a shared parking agreement that says, here, I have a right to 35 parking spaces in connection with my business. They go through, check it off, make sure we haven't over-allocated our parking spaces, and give them their CLUC. So we think that's an improvement ultimately. It's a good idea on the back end, in 3 years from now when we got tenants coming in. So those are the changes between the two proposals, other than, of course, adding civil engineering, stormwater, all the other details that were not in that conceptual plan. Ms. Brooke, are you satisfied? You know where the location of the project is?
Yes,
Those
I know
first-
where it is,
Okay,
right,
so it's a redevelopment of that old
right.
self-storage warehouse site. So right now it's a clear, bared site. The original site plan showing those units and the retail that were originally on the site is there for you, and the existing site. So with the site plan, Ms. Brooke, there are two important aspects that we put into this project that we think make it different. One is that it's tied in with the neighborhood in a way that perhaps other hotel projects in this area were not. We've partnered in great detail with the local homeowners association at Greenway Park, which is our direct neighbor,
Right.
the Seagrove Baptist Church, which is our neighbor to the east, and importantly with the Forest Service, which is our neighbor to the west. And we have determined that this is not a beach-oriented lodging facility, that the theme for the development and for the lodge is going to be oriented to the state forest.
Is that why you call it a lodge rather than a hotel?
That's correct. Besides all the other obvious reasons, we're not trying to hide anything, but it really is a part of the concept for the place. What's the important tie is that if you look at the southwest corner, down at the far left-hand
Right,
side,
right.
you'll see a trailhead building, which is approximately an 800 square foot building with public restrooms. And it is the tie between the project and the state forest. This is the only place where the Point Washington State Forest comes down and touches 30A. And so the Forest Service was very happy to partner with us and get themselves an access onto the 30A multi-use trail and have a 30A access to add to the one that they currently have on 393. So we worked together to design the trailhead facility. They're going to put a new parking area on their side, not on our property, but on the forestry property. And we're working together right now on budgets and designs for a new short loop trail, hopefully ADA accessible trail, with it right next to, in that, what they call the 40-acre parcel, which is the piece that comes down to 30A, and also new connections up to the existing Eastern Lake Trail system. There's an area that needs a bridging to get up to some new trail and camping areas that they're developing. So we had a great relationship with them. We've agreed for the hotel to buy a annual pass for each each room that will be rented each year for the forestry service, and we're working, which we haven't talked to y'all about before, but now we can, to work on and get their help with both the trailhead and with the design and information additions to the trail system. So we're real proud of that partnership. The other partnership has been with the Seaside Institute and working with the county on the new multimodal mobility plan, the park and ride plan, which actually their original plan had a hub, what they call a transit hub, right in the location where we have our trailhead facility. So it becomes a dedicated stop on the park and ride system up and down 30A. So we've been working with Public Works and with Seaside Institute on being the poster child for those transit hub locations. Public-private partnership. This trailhead will be a part of the Commercial Owners Association for the shopping center. So it'll be maintained not by the Forestry Service, but by the owner and the commercial association. So it'll stay in good shape. We will have retailers for e-bikes and bicycles in that location as a part of the agreement on the multimodal study. You can get on a bike here, ride to Rosemary, get back. You can get on a bike here, off the transit, ride to Rosemary, Fallis, get off, leave the bike, get back on the transit, get back to your car. One way of eliminating beach traffic. Those are the high points, and you can see the design on the 3D drawing there in front of you, the aerial site plan. And then the design on the front elevations of the different buildings. Sorry, Bob, I'm not helping much with this. Just kind of running them back and forth as we go. And I know you guys have heard it all, and I apologize for going extra long, but I wanted to make sure
everybody understands.
wanted to make sure that Ms. Brooke had a full briefing. I can come in front of you to Ms. Brooke and to remind the rest of y'all, we did get the endorsement from the South Walton Community Council board that they approved of the design and wanted to forward these concepts and really advocate for them. We also had the support of the Greenway Park HOA, the Seagrove Baptist Church as well, our immediate adjacent neighbors. So we're pretty proud of it.
It's a lovely looking facility. It really is.
We hope it'll be a jewel.
It's great looking.
And just
If you're gonna give back.
Anybody have any
good,
questions?
so
Any
it's
questions?
great.
Oh, I like this
No.
one. This one's good looking.
Absolutely good looking.
Okay.
What can we avoid having to hear from Dean?
I'm working on that. I do need to just make a point. Sydney,
I'm sorry.
I know we've entered the staff report in as part of the record. We used to, and to just make the motion of adding the file in as part of the record, which contains all of our reports and all of our expert reports. So as Exhibit 2, we just like to submit the county planning staff's file on the project that contains all the evidence that we need to present to make sure that
Most accepted.
we've established our entitlement.
Just for my own edification, because we're close where we can ask questions, I'm interested to know if there's anyone committed in the retail at this point of commercial parcels, or is there a restaurant coming, or is it a concept, or?
I can tell you that the developer and the owner reps have been working with a retail consultant.
Okay.
It's a particular theming idea that we're working on.
Okay.
And I don't think we have any commitment to this point.
Sure.
I can tell you that.
And I'm being nosy.
Okay, no, it's fine.
All I'm doing is being nosy.
It's a good question. Look, I like it very much when I go to the HOA board meeting and ask them if they got any problems with the project, and they go, yeah, we want to know when we can lease some office space.
Sure.
When I got that problem, that's a good problem.
Right.
And the other thing that I didn't mention, which is important, it was very important in the neighborhoods to the south, was that we're actually getting close to having a management agreement completed with St. Joe. And we'll have local management through St. Joe as the manager for the lodge facility and the condominiums that are related all the residential properties there. And as part of that, we're looking for we're working on a commitment from them on being able to utilize the Watersound Beach Club for beach access for our guests. So that's an important aspect of what we're going to offer the guests and who will be running the show once we get up and running. Looking at a solid probably a solid 2-year construction to opening. It'll be developed all in one phase.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, sir. We'll open up for public comments. Is there anybody who wishes to address this item? Yes, sir.
I did sign in earlier, so you have my name and address. Greg,
Go ahead
I'm
and state your name for the record.
I'm Dr. Greg Parker.
Dr. Parker, were you sworn in earlier?
I listened to it. I'll hold my hand up. You can
That's
swear me
fine.
now.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide to this board will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Spoken as a retired Navy captain. Thank you to the board. It's the first time I've stood to say the Pledge of Allegiance in quite a number of years. I think that's a good thing. I'm the president of the Seaview Villa Homeowners Association, which is just west of this development. We were not consulted, so this is my first real knowledge of this project. I like the project. I think that, and I spent much time out front talking to the people. In my time, my 43 years of federal service, I've been well known as a disaster preparedness person, responding to many hurricanes worldwide and other disasters. 30A is a road system which is incapable of handling the current road traffic, especially during peak season. And I have a question for the Planning Commission. Is there north-south corridor coming? Is it on the books and has it been taken care of?
I cannot answer that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So if there's
Are you
not,
talking about an additional north-south connector from 38 to 98?
That, sorry. So obviously we're constrained by all of the property that's owned by the state forest between Highway 98 and 30A. There have been some, considerations and studies conducted by engineers about possibly constructing a connector road between 30A and 98. But in order for us to do that, we would have to have approval from the state. And those are very early preliminary discussions. But we have, I guess, started down the path of trying to make that happen.
so I know this has been talked about for at least the last 10 or 15 years, but we're still in the early phases. Do you get that?
Mr. Parker, I'll say that. That's one thing that I'm glad doesn't have to come to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And
then let me move to
Yeah.
30A itself.
Right.
You've driven 30A, and as you come in from the west to the east, right there where Resort Quest has that office in the little triangular area.
Mm-hmm.
It goes from 25 to 35, that people actually think it says 55. So they come whipping around the curve, and then they hit Seaview Villas entrance, and then they'll hit this development, which is at least 200 parking spaces. What is that? How many cars a day would be going in and out of here? During peak season, with the retail, it could be 400, 500, 600 cars a day. I spoke with the developers out front. They say there's no turn lane. There are no turn lanes. There's not a turn lane coming from east to west or west to east. So I have two concerns. The traffic accidents and the traffic congestion that is inevitably going to occur, and then the encroachment upon the right-of-way so that you won't be allowed or won't be able to put a turn lane in. I mean, I think it's essential from a disaster preparedness standpoint and essential from a safety standpoint to have a turn lane at least when you're heading west to east, so that if you're turning left hand into this large development and complex, it would be nice if you had one coming from east to west. I don't think it's as essential since you have the service road and the connectors that are going in that way. But I think that you have to seriously consider the traffic on 30A. And if it's not your purview to do a north-south corridor, then please take it to the county commissioners. And as part of this project, I think it should be a recommendation, north-south corridor, ease the traffic. It's been helpful that 395 and 30A is with the light. That's been a big improvement. This development itself is going to bring in enough congestion, along with the purple turtle or whatever it is that's going in across the street, you know, whatever. The traffic is going to be a major problem. The second point of the traffic is, what about construction traffic and noise during the construction period? Will the construction not start until a reasonable hour? Will there be pilings put in place? What's the effect upon the neighbors in the neighborhood? We were not consulted. So we are the closest inhabited neighborhood on the west side, and we're on a bit of the forest there.
Obviously, I can't answer that, but I can say that this developer they have shown through this process that they're more than willing to work with those affected by it. And yeah,
They left me out.
yeah, there's a required distance for notification.
I got that.
Okay. Yeah, so,
I got the distance notifications while I'm
Okay.
here.
okay, but,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
Thank you. Good questions. What we didn't include in our presentation was the time and money that we spent working with the county manager and several of the commissioners on different alternative access corridors. You know, they call them 1 and 5, or the ones
Right.
that are still in the
infancy.
and they're still in the Atkins is still looking at it. One is that AEC power corridor that goes just on the east side of Eastern Lake. There's a power station, and it goes right up the right of way. And the other literally comes right down to the to our trailhead building in its current design, and heads up to 393. So they're still looking at, is it 95? I'll never get it. So they're still looking at those two. We've been big advocates for anything that will help. When we saw the time frame in terms of how long that might take, if ever, we bought into the park and ride mobility study as the other way to reduce automobile traffic. On the second part, we agree that the super elevated turn right there is a traffic adventure. There are two aspects of the plan that really address that, and we think that one is that this will be one of the major crosswalks along this entire section of 38. It'll be a lighted, at least from our discussions with Public Works, it'll be a lighted major pedestrian crossing to get from the multi-use trail up to the transit hub, up to the forest access. So we haven't, in all the engineering studies and working with the planning folks, determined that a turn lane in 30A one way or the other is necessary, but we're pretty wide open.
Is it possible?
The part of what and I guess neither Tim nor I mentioned it, part of what we've agreed to do with Public Works is move off the detailed design of what's going to happen in the right of way, down to civil engineering design, and including the right of way agreement, which is how it's going to get paid for, when it's going to get done, off to a separate discussion once we get the detailed PUD approved. Then we start figuring out exactly what that entire right of way is going to look like in front of the project. What we ask for it, because the 30A mobility study, if you've seen any of the road profiles that they're asking for, ultimately, we said we want to be in on that. We want to keep this area of the right-of-way very flexible for the addition of a new multi-use trail, a new transit lane, 2 dedicated automobile lanes. That's what they're talking about now. We've got 70 feet of right-of-way along this section. So we hope that we'll be able to accommodate most all of that within those 70 feet or widen the right-of-way. So to his point, the crosswalk, we think, will be a significant and important change in that speedway. But if there are other speed calming devices, if there a turn lane would be necessitated, we're in. So the design of that, and we'd be glad to have him involved in the discussions with Public Works or anybody on the board, since it's their part of the roadway too, to figure out what we can do with that section.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate, I'd like to get your card before one of us leaves. We have a crosswalk already that's dedicated. It's gonna be less than 100 feet from where this crosswalk is gonna be. It doesn't have any lights in it. It doesn't slow the traffic down. And unless you do something really dramatic, a crosswalk is not gonna change the traffic pattern. My wife, I walk out in front of the traffic, she says, you're gonna get hit and killed one day. And I said, I'm in a crosswalk. I think that's a bit naive to think that a crosswalk is gonna slow the traffic down. It only works at Seaside, when there are more people than there are cars. So I would like to be part of it. I just think a crosswalk is a poor substitute for actually traffic engineering.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I need to be educated a little bit here, and Tim, you may be the one to answer the question. There's a section that talks about transportation concurrency. This project does not meet Walton County Transportation Concurrency under the Walton County Land Development Code, Chapter 3. This project impacts deficient segments of County Road 30A. Developer may be eligible to satisfy this transportation concurrency requirement through proportional share contribution. When do we know whether they can make a contribution to, or what?
I believe, and I can't remember, I think it was Tim that announced the proportionate fair share amount would be $130,000.
$133,000.
Right, the amount is there, but it says they may be eligible. It doesn't say
I think
they-
that's a misstatement. So under,
It's pay and go. So they
Right.
will have to pay this $133,000 before they get their building permit.
Okay.
We're not gonna issue the permit until they pay the fee.
They are eligible to pay it. That was just a slight.
That's the way Dewberry words it,
All right.
but it really comes down to pay and go. You pay your fee, you get your permit, you start construction.
I don't like that either. That's the way it is.
yeah, and we are working on
Yeah.
moving towards a mobility fee, which will probably in the long term address a lot of the issues that we have. But right now, we're under the proportionate fair share framework, and
No,
that's
I
what
had read the material showing what it was and how it worked,
Well,
but
and just
then
so
the
you
wording
know,
was a
all
little-
of 30A is deficient. So
Yeah,
anything
well, I
on
think
30A is
I
gonna
know.
generate a proportionate fair share fee.
I live off of 38, so I know
Yeah.
it's deficient.
And different segments have different fees, so that's why they show the fees for those 3 segments and then they add it up to get the total.
see.
But they're not all the same. They're different segments have different fee structures.
Okay.
But, I mean, maybe you did already know that, but all of 30A is deficient.
I just wish we had a better way to do it myself. You know.
Well, and that's why we're looking at the mobility.
Right, I understand. I mean, that's something we've been talking about for years, so it's just a matter of getting it done.
Just wanted a little education.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, what's your pleasure?
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve on this one.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Actually, the motion needs to include, make sure we include the conditions.
Yes.
So,
As stated.
yeah. And there's a bunch of them.
Do
Yeah,
you have all the conditions that you need over there?
They're in the staff report. Yeah.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're back to number 3.
Thank you, Commissioners. Yes, we're back to number 3. This is the Miramar Beach Hotel. It's a major development. It's been reviewed by Tim Brown, and we'll ask Tim to introduce this one also.
Thank you. This is a major development order submitted by ECM requesting approval to develop a 71-unit hotel and associated infrastructure on 1.6 acres with a future land use in a zoning category of coastal center. It's located on the north side of Highway 98, west of Forest Shore Drive and east of North Holiday Road. Due to the road widening through Miramar Beach, they do have sufficient capacity, so they do not have a proportionate share requirement. They
That
do.
might be the first time I've heard that down there.
They've already, even though the road's not done, the capacity's been put into the system,
Wow.
the concurrency system. They have 9 conditions, environmental and fire. It has been through the design review board. It went to their meeting on December 6th. It was approved by a vote of 6-0. They had 1 condition, and this has actually been incorporated into the new code as well. The lighting shall be between 3,000 and 5,000 kelvins, and if you're not aware, kelvins is the warmth of the light. Foot candles is the brightness of
Where's
the
David
light.
Kramer when you need him?
Yeah, no kidding. What difference does the warmth make?
It's not as harsh. When you're looking at the light, it's not as harsh.
Oh, you're not talking about
It's
actual
a softer
heat.
light.
It's a softer, right. It's,
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
you had temperature.
Don't maybe worry about burning the foliage over there.
I mean, the other thing is, basically, it's less glare, right? It's,
Yeah.
it's a
Gotcha.
softer, so there's less glare. And we've also, and they agreed to, they didn't make a condition, but we've also put in the code now too, in the scenic corridor, that the light poles can't exceed 14 feet as the maximum height. So I'll answer, I would like to, staff will put into the record, and I'll answer any questions you may
Just
have.
accept. Anybody have any questions of staff right now?
No.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Darrell Barnhill with ECM. For the record, I've not been sworn in, so,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide to this board will be the truth?
yes. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for my tardiness. The medical treatment lasts a little bit longer today than what it usually lasts. But this project, we've worked with Mr. Carpenter's staff for the last 6 months, and we can say that there's no outstanding issues. There's no exceptions that we're asking for. We've got Dewberry's response, and we've met all the engineering requirements, and we were very lucky on the traffic. When we did the adjacent project, the owner paid nearly $50,000 in traffic concurrency, and now this one to the west pays nothing. But I know that you've been here a long time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have regarding the project. But again, there's no issues that's outstanding on this.
Commissioners, have any questions for the applicant? This looks like a good project to me, so. Definitely needed. I guess it's needed, I guess, if you think more people need to come to Walton County. I think it's needed. Seeing none.
Okay, thank you.
Taylor Stanton? Yes, ma'am. We're going to open up public comments, so.
I have not been sworn in either. Just raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide to this board will be the truth?
Yes, thank you. I'm a resident that backs up to this property. I live off of Mariner Way. So I just had a couple questions in regards to, I guess, the structure itself. What efforts are going to be undertaken to prevent visual, or to ensure visual privacy from the impacted residents? Is that
You want me to answer one at a time?
Yeah, just go through them and then
Okay.
we'll have him answer them, okay?
okay? You answered the light pollution. Let me see. What efforts will be made to prevent runoff from entering adjoining residential properties? And what efforts will be made for noise abatement from hotel traffic? And then additionally, construction hours, do we have any idea what that will look like?
They generally work from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Perfect.
We'll have him answer those things
Okay.
for you, okay?
All right, thank you.
If you had a chance to look at the site plan, there are some wetlands immediately north of the property. And so, of course, we're backing off of those wetlands and making sure we don't disturb those in any fashion. And then we're planting, all of the required vegetation that the county's dictated in its Land Development Code, a comprehensive plan. And so we're doing everything that we know to do to try to prevent any view from the adjacent properties to the north. As for the drainage, I was hoping that issue would come up, because right now the drainage flows to the north and it floods the property to the north because they used to live back there. We're reversing that flow. We're capturing that flow, and it's flowing back south away from the property to the north. And so drainage to the north should see a substantial improvement after our construction. So,
Question on, I think her first question as far as, I know that you have to meet a required buffer.
yes,
How close are the houses, like I said, I'm not familiar with it, directly behind where this hotel will be?
probably,
Will the parking lot back up
Probably-
to their yards?
no, sir, we've got about 50 feet or more of wetlands that we can't disturb before
Okay.
before we get onto her backyard. So there's probably 100 feet between the buffer line, our wetlands line, and her back property. And then we've got close to 75 feet before we start our building inside of that wetlands line.
Okay. What type of vegetation will be back there?
Well, we've had a landscaping architect do that. They've done the landscaping plan. I don't even pretend to be knowing the names of all what's spec'd out. I remember seeing crepe myrtles and different plants, but
Well, I understand, I know you've met the requirements, I'm
Yes,
just
sir.
trying to help her to understand what is being done.
if.
And I think that,
Sure.
Tim, go ahead.
If I may, right behind the parking lot there is a 25-foot wetland buffer, so that has to be undisturbed.
Okay.
So in terms of landscaping in the rear, there's gonna be basically none except
Right.
what's existing in the wetland.
Right.
They are gonna put some, a little on that right corner, between the parking lot and the buffer. But in terms of landscaping, there's gonna be virtually none in the rear. They're on the sides and they're in the front.
Okay.
But he's right, there's at least, it's at least 50 feet from the property line to the parking.
Okay.
It may be more, but there's at least 50 feet. And to answer, I mean, I know it's not my job to answer.
That's okay.
But they've got a retaining wall along that parking lot, and on top of the retaining wall, they have an aluminum fence. So with the elevations, it's gonna be about, I think we figured out it's gonna be like 7.5 feet tall. Cause they're gonna build up the site, then you got the retaining wall,
Right.
then you've got an aluminum fence above that. So we estimate it's about 7.5 feet tall. So that's gonna be right along the rear parking lot there,
Mm-hmm.
up against the wetland buffer.
Okay.
We didn't have we didn't have the option of adding more plants into the
Right.
buffer.
Right, because of the wetlands back there.
Yes, sir.
I understand.
And we did reduce the lighting down. We reduced it to the 14 feet and met all the requirements as far as the brightness and the candela distribution.
Okay.
So,
There's sometimes that things meet all the conditions of the code, but it's not gonna be necessarily comfortable for everybody around it, which is unfortunate, but I know this developer does a lot of things, and they tend to do everything they can. But all we really can look at is, are they meeting the requirements of the code? So that's our measure of, does it meet the requirements or not? Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
If you would, please.
Sure. Could you please provide the applicant's agent with a copy of it? The gentleman behind you. Sure.
If you would state your name for the record.
Pardon me?
If you would state your name for the record.
Donald Swanby?
Were you sworn in, Mr. Swampy?
No.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide to this board will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
And spell your last name for Ms. Owens over, I'm sure.
It's on the document I just gave you. It's S-W-A-N-D-B-Y.
Thank you.
My wife and I reside at 110 Mariner Way, which is directly to the north of the parking lot. And I have some bullet points and some things that I'd like some confirmation on, some of our concerns, and even some requests. As far as the retaining wall, is that going to be a continuous retaining wall along the north, the east, and the west side of the parking lot?
Why don't you address us and we'll have him answer. In fact, you could probably, Mr. Barnhill, you could probably, if you want to turn that microphone on. Yes, thank you. It's probably easier because.
Okay.
Go
ahead. The retaining wall is primarily on the north side and east side. It's very close to existing grade on the west side. So there's no retaining wall shown along the west side. We're going to try to pull that in by natural ground to the grade, match it to grade.
On one of your documents that
you would address us up here, okay?
On one of the documents, it shows that the existing ground level is roughly 12 feet. At our property line, it's about 11.77. And so it's flowing slightly north at the moment.
Well, he addressed that in his opening comments.
But they're raising it to 15.62.
Right, but they've addressed the engineering part of all that.
Yes, sir. We're capturing any water on our property and reversing it back south.
It should be better for you, drainage-wise.
Yes, sir.
But if there needs to be a retaining wall on the west side as well.
We didn't design a wall on the west side. It comes in here.
That's where our existing flooding is coming from. You can see a photograph that I've attached at the back from, that is my neighbor adjacent to the west, which is directly behind the proposed hotel.
Right.
When it rains, that's how much flooding we get.
I think that's what he was trying to address earlier in the engineering of this project, that they've engineered it to capture all that and actually prevent water from going back to the north.
Yes, sir.
So it should, engineering-wise, which we have to believe that the engineer knows what they're doing, it should make it better for you than it is today.
But our existing issues with water is because of the adjacent sleep center. When that was built in 2007, there is no exfiltration system.
Well, we can't address
It's a
that.
runoff. And there was a man-made retention pond there, and that overflows, and that's what goes into our properties.
So it's not this property that's affecting your property?
That's where the majority, that's where we believe the majority of the water is coming from.
Right.
So if there's no retaining wall on the western edge of this property, that water is gonna go right back into our existing problem. I guess I'm asking for the retaining wall to be all the way on the west side, all the way up to the building at least, and the north side, and then angled on the.
What we've got on that, if I may interject, we've got a retaining wall on the west side projecting south until it ties into natural ground. So there's no reason to have a wall where it allows us, our grade, to tie into natural ground. And so also too, we're using an inverted crown section where all the water goes into our system and our roof gutters are tied straight into our exfiltration system. So as per Dewberry's review, every drop of water that falls on that site will not go north.
Right.
So on the west side, how far up does that retaining wall extend? Does it extend up to the hotel?
It goes into the back of the building, if that helps any. I mean, it's,
Back of the hotel building?
Yeah,
back of the hotel building, yes, sir.
Okay.
I think drainage-wise, you'd be better off than you are today.
And that's what the clarification I wanted was the
Right.
retaining wall
Right,
will extend all the way to the building
right.
and then along the north edge of the property, which is the single-family homes, and then it angles. And then does it go, does it continue south on the east side as well?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And does that go all the way to the driveway between the cigar factory and the proposed site right now?
No, sir, we're not, we're going up to the, yes, to the driveway. We've got, that's where we tie back in the natural ground at the driveway.
To the driveway?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay.
Uh-huh.
That's the clarification I was looking for.
Okay. Anything else?
So the retaining wall is 3.5 feet or so below ground, and above ground is roughly 4 feet, or 3 feet, 3.5 feet, and then there's the fence. And so from our side of the project, it looks like it's gonna be about 7.5 feet tall. So I guess that should take care of any impact from headlights coming into our property. As far as sound goes, it says it's an aluminum fence. Is it a solid structure, that fence?
No.
Is it solid?
No, sir. It wasn't designed to be solid. We thought that would, after we went through the DRB process, we thought that was discussed, and a solid aluminum fence would not, I don't know if we'd have much luck before the DRB with that idea.
And this is gonna be a solid structure because on the hotel parking lot, there's only 8 inches of concrete, and then it's that 3.5-foot aluminum fence. And on the other side of that is going to be about a 7-8 foot drop if somebody happened to fall over that. So is that a solid fence?
Look at the contours here. Well, we know it won't be a solid aluminum fence. I can say that without reservation. And of course, we put as minimal amount of fill as we had to on the site for both functional and economics. But you had a question about we can't build a solid aluminum fence, but if you, maybe if you'll rephrase your question, I can answer it in a different way.
I guess our concern is, first of all, is automobile headlights. So I didn't want a fence that the lighting could go through. And the other thing is the fence going to help with any type of sound?
Okay. All right. What else?
On the north side of the building, which faces us, there are some windows at the end of the hallway, which is customary. But on the second and third floor, those views would be directly into our homes, our pool areas, our patios, our kitchens, our bedrooms. So I'd like those to possibly be occluded, where light could go through, but there could not be any visibility to our single-family homes.
I don't know how you do that. I mean,
It's like bathroom windows or stained glass.
Mr. Chairman, it's over 150 feet from that building, at least through the wetlands and the vegetation, and toward anybody's house.
How much vegetation is in that wetland back there?
There's not a whole lot immediately adjacent to it. When you get further on the property line, there's some pretty good sized trees north along the property line, but nothing immediately.
The largest trees are going to be removed. There's roughly 50 feet, 25 feet of wetlands. And then as you head south, there's that 25-foot buffer. And the parking lot begins. And most of those pine trees will be removed. There will be some of the smaller ones existing in the buffer. But when you're looking from the third floor window, the view will be above those trees.
What do you want them to do?
You know, when you have a bathroom window,
I understand.
you can have it where the light comes in,
Right.
but you can't see in or out, occluded.
So you just want cloudy glass, basically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of light filtering film that we use on the beach for turtle hunting.
Sure.
That might be
Yeah, I think
something
that's- sure.
inexpensive that you could put on those to smooth them out a light or
Okay,
something.
sure. If that will, Mr. Chairman, if that will move this project ahead, Mr. Carpenter just made a good suggestion. We'll make it part of it. If you want to make it part of your recommendation for us to apply light filtering film to their windows, that's what's accepted for turtle light situations, and we use those down on the beach. And
Right.
that, if that'll move, we'll certainly accept that as part of the
Okay.
And that would only be needed to be done on the second and third floor on the north
Okay.
side.
Yes.
The other issue on privacy is the actual hotel room windows. When you're talking about the height again, they're going to be peering into our backyards. And I was hoping that there could be some type of a shutter at a 90-degree angle on the north side of those windows, so that when a guest would be looking out, they wouldn't be able to look at my pool with my granddaughter. A very small little shutter
Yeah, I understand what
to
you're saying.
obscure the view into the
So
single
no one
family
ever be
home.
able to look out the window?
No, it would be just a 9-inch, 1-foot shutter perpendicular to the window, on the side of the window.
No, sir, we'll be glad to film it, like Mr. Carpenter said, but to start putting shutters on a hotel, that's just a little bit much.
What about some vegetation on that back area back there?
We'd be glad to do that, Mr. Perry, but we can't do any,
anything in the wetlands.
we can't,
Well, you got a 25-foot buffer there.
we'll be glad to put vegetation on that, but we
put
can't.
anything in the buffer?
The buffer, I don't believe the buffer can be disturbed.
Let me ask a question about the, just because we're talking about the wetlands. If you're gonna reverse the stormwater,
Yes, sir.
which is great for the properties behind it,
Yes, sir.
what happens to the wetlands area? What does that do? It's probably an engineering question, but what does that do to the wetlands when you reduce the amount of water that's been going into those wetlands? Do they dry up some, or what?
I wouldn't expect that because, the soil conditions out there, we did a lot of soils tests. It has very little lateral flow. There's a lot of vertical flow, but very little lateral flow of the water. And so, it appears, based on the soil conditions, when it rains, it's gonna sit there and not go down and laterally flow into our system, because our system is as a closed system. So water can't get into our system from off side. If that makes any sense.
That being said, which we don't really know for sure, is when the wetlands rises, now there's a retaining wall to the south, and so the water won't be able to flow that direction out of. So it appears that this retaining wall and the exfiltration system should not impact our
It should benefit.
our properties anymore. We're hoping.
I don't think
It looks that way.
I don't think you can ever, you have a single-story, even a two-story residence that abuts a commercial property. It's difficult to say no one's ever gonna be able to look out a second-floor window and see that single-story residence behind it.
Well, I'm
I
assuming.
understand your concern, I don't disagree with you, but.
I mean, I assume this is a multi-million-dollar project, and when you have a window, and if you had on the side of the window that much of a shutter, so that when I looked out, I couldn't look out onto the single-family homes. We're talking a few shutters, it's not a lot of money.
No, it can make, that can be suggested, I don't think we can require it, it's not.
And that's what we're asking for.
Right. We can ask the developer to look at options for that and to see if he can find something.
That would be
to address.
greatly appreciated.
Okay.
The angle isn't so great like the back of the building, the north
Okay.
side, where they're looking directly at us, but there's an angle,
Okay.
and it's high enough.
So we'll ask the developer to take a look at options for that.
Mr. Chairman, we will report back to Mr. Carpenter if that's
Yeah, that's
acceptable,
fine.
our findings.
That's fine.
At the retaining wall, it looks like the ground level will be raised to, what was it, 15.2. But on the elevation, exterior elevation, it shows at the hotel that the ground level will be 22 feet and 8 inches, which was confusing to me. Was I reading that right?
You have to, Mac, you have anything?
I don't know what he's talking about. FFE 16.
It's gotta be an error.
FFE 16.
Right, but the architectural plan shows 22 feet inches.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I can say, there's possibly an error in the architectural plans, but the plans before you tonight only shows an elevation of 16.82, and that's relative to the contours around it.
Right.
So I don't know what that other document has, but our civil plans has shown it 16.82.
Okay.
It's on the architectural plan, and it appears to be an error, because like the finished floor is 16.82.
Right.
The architectural plan is showing 22 feet 8 inches, so it's gotta be an error. Probably so, 12 there, because the existing natural grade there is, if you look on the survey, is more or less 12 and a half. So, Mike's probably right, it's probably supposed to say 12, not 22,
Okay.
but best I can tell.
What we have though is
22
correct.
Well, you have that architectural plan,
Right.
and it says 22A. That has to be an error. We're thinking it should say 12 feet 8 inches.
Okay.
I guess the last thing probably has nothing to do with code or anything, but some of the neighbors were wanting to make sure that any security cameras were not being pointed at us.
Yeah, I'm sure that won't happen, so.
And the photograph I sent was, like I mentioned, the neighbor's yard that's doing some flooding. I don't know if maybe in the future we can see if there's anything that could be done with that sleep center property.
That is way beyond our control. Maybe the BCC or Public Works can help you on that. That's not something we can even address. We only see what's coming before us. We don't even discuss what's coming before us.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anybody else? Seeing nobody, we'll close the public comments. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'd like to say, just to be clear to those who had questions, that, you know, make sure they understand what our role in the process is, and that role is to ensure that a project comes before us and meets the requirements of the code, land development code, the comprehensive plan. We're not a political entity that makes political decisions. It's simply a recommendation to the BCC on whether a project meets the requirements. It's not anything more than that. A lot of what y'all are talking about as far as people being able to see into your yard, I understand that completely, but that's probably a better question proposed to the BCC. But I just don't know what can be done about it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could we include the condition, as a condition, the turtle lighting compliant, film and or light filtering mechanism on the north windows, north facing windows
Sure.
at the end of the building?
Is that acceptable to the motion? Second.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Chairman.
believe that's our last item. We stand adjourned. We'll see you next month at the Freeport office. I figured you'd be somewhere. And you're either out of the country or you accuse yourself, man.
Oktoberfest is over.
They were concerned about